I would hope that people who have studied the economy and who are actually in government right now, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican, I just hope that they're working on this, right? But the thing is, like I said, just looking at the midterm races, you notice that the conservatives and Republicans don't have policy that they're running on. They're just literally running on don't let them trans your kids. Like, what does that even mean? Don't let them trans your kids. Hello, and welcome, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third episode of the Random Thoughts Podcast. My name is Chris, aka Dark Spade, and you're here live on my channel on Twitch. As you know, on Monday nights, I record this podcast live on Twitch so that those of you in chat can be a part of it. However, you can interact with this podcast if you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can leave comments or questions, and I will answer them. Unfortunately, this week we don't have any new questions, mostly because I didn't upload the YouTube version of episode 2 just yet. That's coming up, should be up by tomorrow. So for the next podcast, we will take a question from that YouTube channel if we do get any comments or anything on that YouTube channel. Other than that, welcome in, guys. It's been another week, right? And last week I left you off with the topics of nature versus nurture. We had the midterms, like what the midterms were and who was running and whatnot. Well, not necessarily everybody that was running, but just like what was at stake, basically. And then we also talked about Elon Musk buying Twitter. So this week, it may seem like we're doing the same thing we did last week, but it's basically the results, okay? So we're gonna start off with the midterm results. We're gonna talk about the aftermath of what happened after Elon Musk bought Twitter and everything that's been happening in the past week with that. And then the last topic we'll talk about, before we move into the manosphere stuff, the last topic that we'll talk about is free speech. We're gonna talk about free speech and what that actually means. So before we do get started, I do want to add a correction to last week's podcast. So I said that Dr. Oz was running for governor, and he wasn't. He was running for Senate against John Fetterman. That was his opponent. That was the progressive opponent that he was going up against, not governor. So I do apologize. I made that mistake. I do these podcasts off the top of my head, and sometimes the information gets jumbled up in there. However, the person, I was correct. The person that was running for governor was backed by Donald Trump, and that is Doug Mastriano, who lost to his opponent, Josh Shapiro. And then John Fetterman beat out Dr. Oz. So let's talk about it now that we're getting into some of that after we corrected ourselves from last week. Let us talk about the results of the midterms, okay? If you remember me telling you last week, the midterms sometimes are more important than the general election because they consist of local people that are running for local office. And every 2 years in between each general election cycle, senators will be cycled out. Senators usually do a 6-year term. So that's why you have, some senators that don't run and others that do, because their terms are on different timetables, if that makes sense, right? So you always have a midterm going on. It doesn't matter. You're always going to have one. Now, typically, this is very typical of midterms. Usually the party that is currently in control usually ends up losing seats. They usually end up losing power, essentially, is what ends up happening. And that is because the first 2 years of any president's term are usually the 2 years in which, like, you're basically judging like how the president is doing, because then he has 2 more years to, and especially if he's on his last term. If you don't know, presidents serve 2 4-year terms, right? So if a president has done pretty much 6 years, let's say they've done 1.5 terms of their presidency, then the last 2 years of his presidency, he basically gets to do what he wants, right? So, but you're judging him on basically the first 2 years of that term. So in this example, and what we're seeing right now, the midterms are basically feedback on how Joe Biden is doing as president. Now, again, normally what ends up happening is that the current party in power, they usually end up losing seats in the Senate. They usually lose seats in the House of Representatives, which means that those two houses of Congress end up having more of the opposite political party than the president. And so usually in a president's last 2 years of his term, he ends up having a little more opposition. It gets a little more difficult for him to, like, him or her, you know, because we may have a female president someday, but it makes it difficult for them to actually get any policies done, just because they usually have the party in opposition with a majority in Congress. Now, it's the Democrats have been basically in charge the whole time. They've had a majority in the Senate. They've had a very, like, if I remember correctly, they're very close in the House of Representatives. It wasn't exactly a majority, but it still made it difficult for, like, the Republicans to get anything that they want done. And so what was being predicted, and it is something that, you know, any political analyst will tell you what's going to happen. They were predicting what's called a red wave. Now, the Republican Party is denoted by the color red. That's their, like, main color. The Democrats are blue. That's their main color. So a lot of political analysts and people that do, like, political data and stuff like that, they were predicting a red wave. Essentially, a lot of seats were going to flip to the Republicans because they were currently being held by Democrats. And the reason for that is because of polling that was done before. Polling is the type of thing that they do. It's kind of like surveying, if you really want to think about it. They people go out, you get those annoying phone calls from people involved in a political party. They ask you a few questions, and then they basically write down your answers. They add it into a data sheet, and that essentially tells them, like, it helps them predict things. And so a lot of the polling that was done before the midterms showed that people wanted to vote more Republican than Democrat. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons, and most of it is because just the way that the Republicans and conservatives have been campaigning lately. And so essentially they've been almost like creating problems that don't exist, if that makes sense. And I'll explain what that means here in a little bit. But what ended up happening during the midterms was not what people were predicting. Quite the opposite, actually. What ended up happening was that people came out and voted, just like, you know, they were supposed to. And all the races, every single race that was being run was neck and neck. Now, when a race is neck and neck, that means that, you know, pretty much everybody that could vote is voting. Like, there's no shadiness because that's essentially what the conservatives were saying about the 2020 election. Essentially, they were saying that early on, you know, you had a Republican lead. They call this the Red Mirage. This is what it's called. And early on, they had a Republican lead with the general election. And then out of nowhere, you had an influx of votes for the Democratic candidate, which was Joe Biden at the time. And so what that made them think was that, you know, people were cheating, you know, like, how is it possible that, you know, Donald Trump was leading and at 10 p.m. at night, like, all of a sudden, you know, Joe Biden pulled ahead by a massive lead. And so they call that the Red Mirage. And that's not what happened during the midterms. What happened during the midterms was basically, like, on every hour, and I'm not kidding, I'm like, literally every hour, it would be like the Republicans were leading, then the next hour the Democrats were leading, then it was the Republicans again, then it was the Democrats, and every race was won by small percentage points. It was still higher than the margin of error. If you do anything with statistics, there's always something called the margin of error, which means that because of like any type of like error that could possibly happen, every single error that can be accounted for, there is a percentage that, you don't trust. Okay. But for a lot of these races, the Democrats came out on top. And from the very last thing that I saw was that the Democrats are predicted to have a majority in the Senate. The House of Representatives is still up in the air. And Georgia specifically is moving to what's called a runoff election, meaning in December, they're going to hold another election between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. And if you don't know who these two gentlemen are, they're a bit controversial right now because Raphael Warnock won his election back in 2020 against Loeffler is the person's last name, and she got her seat because the person that had it before her retired, and she like basically got it. And so what's controversial about them two is the fact that Raphael Warnock is I believe he is the first black man to hold that position in Georgia. I have to double check that again. And if I was wrong, I'm going to do a correction for the next episode. But if I remember correctly, yes, he is the first black man to hold that seat in Georgia. And the first Democrat in a very long time to hold that seat, because Georgia, even though you have Atlanta, that's a very progressive city, the rest of Georgia is still very rural and very conservative. And then Herschel Walker is another controversial figure. He is a candidate that was basically handpicked by Donald Trump. He a former NFL player. He has suffered a lot of like head injuries and stuff like that, which basically it's made it tough for him. And a lot of people have said that this has caused him to have like many violent outbursts in the past, because he does have a pretty violent history from what I've read and what I've seen about Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is also the father of the conservative influencer on TikTok, Christian Walker. But the other controversy with Herschel is the fact that his family has basically turned against him. So things were not looking good for Herschel Walker, at least politically, and especially because part of the reason why Herschel Walker was so close, and this is another analysis that I saw, part of the reason why Herschel Walker came so close to basically beating Raphael Warnock was the fact that he's on a ballot with other Republicans, such as Brian Kemp, who won his seat against what is her name? Oof. I'm sorry, guys. I have forgotten the name of the person that was running against Brian Kemp for governor. And so Brian Kemp did retain because he was the incumbent. He was the person that was basically in the seat already, and so he kept his seat. And another analysis, like I said, for Herschel Walker, the other analysis that I saw was that it's going to be difficult for him to win the runoff election just because it's just him. And a lot of people were hoping that this was going to be the end, and because Herschel Walker does not perform very well when it comes to like trying to basically defend himself. His debate against Raphael Warnock was not a very good debate. Raphael Warnock didn't perform that well either, but from what I saw, it was not good for Herschel Walker either. Herschel Walker did not do that well during that debate. And so a lot of people are saying that, since it's going into a runoff, that basically Raphael Warnock has that seat, which gives the Democrats a lead in the Senate, which means that hopefully they'll be able to actually do more stuff than what they've already done. And that's the other point I'm going to get to about these these midterm elections. Sorry. The other point I'm going to get to about these midterm elections is the fact that if you look at the outside on what the candidates were running, okay, it's very clear that the reason why the conservatives lost this round when they should have won, legitimately, as a left-leaning person, I am telling you right now, the Republicans should have won more seats than they got. Okay, and part of that is because, you know, the Democrats haven't been doing everything that they promised. Like, they haven't. Everything that the Democrats have run on, they have failed to produce. But getting to my point, the Democrats at least have policy and things that they are trying, or they say, I'm going to say that they say they're trying to do. But at the moment, the conservatives are running on basically what's called wedge issues. Wedge issues are issues that, you know, they drive a wedge, and that's what they call wedge issues. They drive a wedge between people, basically, right? And so what have the conservatives been running on? They've been running on banning anything that's LGBTQ, banning anything that is trans, right? They've been running on critical race theory and getting rid of it in schools. They've been running on the 2020 election and how, you know, the Democrats cheated to win that election and how Donald Trump should have been president from the get-go. They've been running on all these issues and what they call them also culture war issues. They've been running on these issues and really not what people actually care about, which is, you know, how are they going to make their dollar do more, basically. And don't get me wrong, because the Republicans have been talking about inflation as well, but there's not been anything really to combat inflation. The best that they could do is say that they're going to give corporations and rich people tax cuts. The thing about it is that trickle-down economics, which is what that essentially is for, doesn't work. Trickle-down economics basically means that, you know, from the very, very top of our pyramid, of our financial pyramid, which is the corporations, the people, the wealthy people that who they call job creators, right? People that create jobs, people that have the money and the capital to create jobs, right? These people are going to let their wealth trickle down to us, the normal everyday people that are struggling to get by. And that's essentially the idea of trickle-down economics. So how do you make it so that these people in power, the people that run corporations, the rich people, how do they create jobs? And their belief is you give them every single tax break possible. Essentially, these corporations don't pay nearly anything in tax because they have policy in place that allows them to basically claim things on their tax returns that we couldn't claim, right? And that makes it so that they keep more of their money, and the idea is that these people then use the money to create more jobs, to create more opportunity for other people like us. But as we know, if you study the economy and you see what's happening, you notice that that's not what the money is used for. It's mostly used for stock buybacks, CEO bonuses, and I mean it's money that's stored away and never put back into our economy. So tax breaks are not the way to combat inflation, unfortunately, and that's all the conservatives and Republicans have as far as a financial policy to combat inflation. You may be asking, what is even inflation? Inflation is just the rate at which things, consumer goods and stuff, get more expensive. There is a normal line of inflation because as the years progress, our money changes value. Okay, what you could buy for $20 back in 1999 does not compute anymore, if that makes sense to you guys. Like, do you guys remember, you guys hear people talk about like bring back $20 tanks, like back when I could fill my gas tank with $20? And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about inflation. There is a normal rate at which inflation rises, and that's just because, you know, goods and commodities get expensive over time, and the value of the dollar doesn't stay the same. It doesn't matter what happens, the value of the dollar always decreases. And so, but the thing is that inflation is at a much higher rate than normal. And that's what's causing the problem right now with, you know, not being able to afford things that you used to. And I'm not a political, or I'm not a financial analyst, so I don't have answers. I would hope that people who have studied the economy and who are actually in government right now, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican, I just hope that they're working on this, right? But the thing is, like I said, just looking at the midterm races, you notice that the conservatives and Republicans don't have policy that they're running on. They're just literally running on don't let them trans your kids. Like, what does that even mean? Don't let them trans your kids, right? They're running on, they're teaching your kids that white kids are bad, that being white is bad. And that's not what's happening. I can tell you as an educator myself, who has been in the school system, that's not what's happening. They're running on, hey, you know, Disney and cartoons, they're showing that gay people exist. Well, I'm sorry, but they've existed for a while, so can't hide that. You know, they're running on, they're taking the kids to the drag shows, and that's degeneracy. I mean, I wouldn't take my son to a drag show, but I mean, from what I understand, they weren't putting on a drag show. There was people in drag, and they were just like serving the kids hamburgers and fries and stuff like that, and just kind of showing them that they're not like crazy people, right? So again, these are the issues that the Republicans and conservatives have been running on, versus, you know, the Democrats that have been trying to put an infrastructure plan in, you know, a plan where our tax dollars go to fix the roads, and not just the roads, but make it so that everywhere has high-speed internet access, right? Because that's part of the infrastructure now. If you don't believe that high-speed internet is part of infrastructure, then you haven't been paying attention to the past 20 years of technological advancements. We're at the point where internet is actually an integral part of society. Pretty much everything runs on the internet. You have point of sale, you know, your POS systems at shopping stores and stuff like that. It runs on the internet. Even jobs that you wouldn't think that run on the internet now, and you need fast, high-speed internet to do your job effectively. So yes, the roads, the railways, bridges, every mode of transportation, you know, using our tax dollars to bring those back up to code, because, you know, the bridges and stuff have been crumbling and we need to fix them. Giant potholes outside on the highways and stuff like that. So yes, the Democrats have tried to put in a plan to fix the infrastructure or add infrastructure where infrastructure is needed, right? But again, that plan didn't pan out, mostly because there was a lot of opposition. Even within the Democratic Party, there was a lot of opposition towards the plan, right? Mostly because they thought it was too expensive. But I always like to say, I mean, if it's going to a good cause, then why not? I mean, if we're going to fix the roads, right? I heard something a long time ago that says that being poor is the most expensive thing that you can do. And it was explained to me like this, right? If you are a construction worker and you need boots to work, right? If you buy the cheapest boots, they're only going to last you like 2 months because they're going to get worn out quickly. And so what happens? You're going to have to buy boots again to replace the ones that you just got done using up, right? And so if you buy the cheaper boots, you're over time, eventually you're going to end up spending more money than if you would have just bought the pricier boot, right? And you can't afford it because you don't have the money to afford it. But let's say somebody who does have the money to afford it can, right? So they do. They buy the more expensive boot. It lasts them, And I wouldn't say it lasts them like a whole lot longer, but you know, it lasts them a little bit longer so that they don't have to buy a new boot every 2 to 3 months, right? And so it ends up being less expensive over time. And so why do I say that now? I say that, well, if the price tag was a lot to get to begin with, because we have so many issues that need to be fixed, like why spread it out over so many years, right? Why spread it out longer? Why try to argue down a lesser price tag that wouldn't cover as much and then have to do it again in the next few years because, you know, we didn't get it done the first time. So, I mean, that's essentially the way I see it, right? If the price tag was too big for the infrastructure plan, I don't agree with that, because we do have a lot. I drive on these roads as much as you guys probably do, and you know, they need fixing. I mean, we have places in this country that don't have clean water. Like, that's crazy, right? To think about that in the United States of America, there are places where you can't drink the tap water. I know a lot of you in your cars or wherever you listen to this were just like, what, drink the tap water? Yes, the water from the tap is safe to drink in most places. Get a Brita filter or something. But even like in places in Michigan, you can't drink water because it's so contaminated. Even if you run it through a Brita filter, it's not safe to drink. Places out west where they're doing fracking, which is where they extract natural gas, where if you light fire into your faucet with water running will light on fire. Like, that's insane, and that is things that they need to be fixed, guys. And so it frustrates me when I see things like the infrastructure plan basically fail, because it's something that the country needed. Another thing that frustrates me that I saw fail was the student loan forgiveness. A lot of people are thinking that, you know, yeah, that's your responsibility. You took out the loan, so pay back the loan, right? And to that, I would say, well, why did you trust an 18-year-old to take out such a big loan? An 18-year-old who doesn't have any credit history at all to take out such a big loan, and such a predatory loan, because I've seen stories of people who have spent the last like 25 years trying to pay back their student loan and end up paying almost 3 times the amount, because, you know, when you tackle on interest and stuff like that, that's a lot of money you're spending, and all you were trying to do was better yourself. Now you may be thinking, you may be wanting to say, hey, I mean, there's other options, right? But you got to understand that not everybody's built for every profession, right? People that are trying to better themselves, they're trying to better their minds so that they work with their minds, right? They shouldn't be punished for trying to better themselves. And that's what these loans basically are doing. They're punishing people for taking the time to go to school and try to better themselves. And then they end up paying back like triple, quadruple the amount that they took out because of interest. So even though the up to $20,000 forgiveness isn't what I expected or what I wanted, right? It still takes a big chunk out of, like, let's say my student loan, which I owe like $38,000. Like, that took a big chunk. Now, if I get it, that's if I get it, because I applied for it. I haven't gotten any response back that I know of. But if I get it, that means that I only owe $18,000, and that's more manageable. It's a more manageable loan that I can handle at that point, right? So again, I look. This is the way I see this midterm election. The reason why the red wave did not happen, the reason why the Republicans did not take back the seats that they were expecting to take back, the reason why they didn't flip any seats, any major seats anyways, is the fact that the things that they were running on are basically things that people are tired of hearing about. Like, really, like, you don't think people get tired of hearing that, oh, the Democrats like drinking children's blood? clearly when they know people that are Democrats in their lives and they know that that's not true? You think that people don't get tired of hearing they're transing your kids when there's like literally only one trans kid in a school? Like just one? You know what I mean? Like, the thing is that the narratives get harder to prove when you start going back out into the world and seeing that these narratives are just not true. But again, that's the results of the midterm. No red wave, and there's still some races that haven't finished being counted. At least at the time of recording this podcast, there's still a few that are still being counted just because of all the rules that were put into place because of 2020, because people were claiming that, you know, the Democrats cheated in 2020. So they put in a bunch of rules, and it literally made it so that counting votes became such a hassle that we won't know the results to some of these races for another week, maybe. But at least for right now, it is predicted that, you know, the Democrats will hold control over the Senate. You know, the governor's races have been pretty even all the way out, all throughout. I think like in Florida, Ron DeSantis kept his seat. Can't even remember if he was running. I can't remember if he was actually running, but I know he's there still. Pennsylvania has a Democratic governor now. Here in North Carolina, I know that Cherry Beasley lost versus Ted Budd. I know that he was the incumbent, I think, and he retained the seat. So yeah, I mean, like I said, that's the result of the midterm elections. If you want to know more, I mean, Google has a pretty good look at it. If you want to type it into Google, you can type in midterm results and it'll have more details about it. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts on the midterm and the results. So let's move on to the next topic, which again is something we covered last week. And if you remember, we covered Elon Musk buying Twitter last week, and I told you the story of how he ended up buying Twitter and what ended up happening. And now we get to see the immediate fallout of what's happening at Twitter. So what's happening at Twitter? Oh, Twitter is imploding. Twitter is literally imploding. It's losing value. Advertisers have pulled out of the platform completely, 1000%. They're like, we're out of here. Partly because Elon Musk decided, and this is the next topic after this, Elon Musk decided that Twitter has to be a free speech haven. And so what did people do? People did what people do on the internet, and they started using racial and other slurs on Twitter. And there was no like backlash or anything, no immediate backlash anyways. So what did this do? This made a lot of advertisers pretty nervous about advertising on Twitter. So the advertisement agencies started pulling their ads off of Twitter, which is the main way that Twitter makes money. A lot of these social media platforms make money in a few ways. Social media platforms make money off of selling your data. So yeah, take a quick read of your privacy policy on any of your social media platforms. But basically, all social media platforms sell your data, okay? And they essentially sell your name, your likes, things that you look at, right? Interests and stuff like that. That's the type of data that they sell to advertisers and other things. So yeah, that's one way that they make money. The other way they make money is through the advertisers themselves. They sell ad blocks and stuff. Not ad blocks, sorry. They ad spots. They sell ad spots on their platform. And so when advertisers saw that Twitter was basically becoming the wild, wild west of social media, they pulled out all their advertisers because obviously they don't want to be associated with, you know, people like racist people or people that are talking reckless on the internet. So that's one thing that's making Twitter implode, guys. The fact that they're losing money, and we're talking millions of dollars almost every hour. And a man who thought that he was above everything, who took out a $44 billion loan to buy this company, right? So what happened after that? Advertisers pulled out, right? Then you had Elon Musk firing the board of directors and firing people essential to making Twitter work. They started firing people that looked at the algorithm. He started firing people that basically looked at the content to make sure that it complied with the terms of service of Twitter, right? He fired people that were in charge of like looking at misinformation and making sure the misinformation is not on Twitter. He fired all these people. He fired people that were essential to making Twitter function, like actually function. And so what ended up happening after that is that he essentially broke the law and realized that he broke the law because he fired them on the spot. You're supposed to give these people notice, and you're supposed to give them time to basically sort out their arrangements and stuff like that, so that they're not just like out on the street, you know. You have rights as an employee, and so Elon Musk broke that law with the Twitter employees when he realized that he tried to get a few of them back. You know, he tried to pay them their severance packages and stuff like that. But even so, like, it was hard to get some of those people to come back and work for Elon Musk because he was being a shithead. Let's be honest. He was honestly just being a shithead because he wanted to get rid of the people that worked at Twitter so that he can do whatever he wanted with it. So what happens after that, you may be asking? Well, Elon tried very, very hard to get his new Twitter verification process started. The Twitter verification process, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast and I can't remember if I did or not, but the Twitter verification process already had issues. There was already issues with the Twitter verification process. But people who are notable, people who were well known, had no issues getting Twitter verified. Because, I mean, they have people, you know, I'm sure that, you know, celebrities and people like public figures and stuff like that knew someone who worked at Twitter at some point. And so for them, it was easier to get verified by Twitter. But let's say like for like social media influencers on the rise and stuff like that, those people had a little more difficulty getting Twitter verified. And what did Elon Musk do with this Twitter verification process? Elon Musk decided that he wanted to make it basically a subscription where you pay $8 a month, $7.99. You pay $8 a month to get the verification badge. What kind of problems will this cause? You may be asking. What's the big deal? Like getting Twitter verified, what's the big deal? What you all need to understand is that Twitter, whether you like it or hate it, is the town hall of the United States and the world in some places, right? Because there are places where Twitter runs in the world. It's not just here in the US. But it is basically the town hall where people go and talk. You can talk to millions of people from across the world, share ideas, right? But you also get news on the spot. Pretty much every reporter, every notable reporter has a Twitter account where they can break news. It's information. Twitter is literally where people get information. A lot of people were getting their news from Twitter because it's faster to break something on Twitter than it is to, like, you know, edit a segment and put it together and then put it out on traditional platforms. Twitter, whether you love it or hate it, has become integral to a lot of people's work, right? And how do you sort through the millions millions of accounts on Twitter. How do you sort and verify and get the correct information from the right people? Twitter verification is how you did it. So for example, if you were looking at Guy Fieri's Twitter account, you knew you were looking at the real Guy Fieri's Twitter account because it had the verification badge next to it, right? At least you knew that that was a way to sort out between fake or like meme Guy Fieri accounts, right? The Guy Fieri account, the official one, had a Twitter verification badge. So when you start making this a subscription that you can pay for, that anybody can pay for, you basically open the door for people to make parody and meme accounts and try to pass them off as the real thing. So for example, there is I want to say there was somebody who did not have an official Twitter account at all, and somebody went and made one and paid the one-time fee, because like there's these new types of virtual credit cards you can get where you basically you put your money into it and then it does a one-time payment only. So that's how some people have gotten around like paywalls and stuff like that. Places that you need to buy a monthly subscription to continue like using the service. People have gone and like gotten these virtual credit cards, put however much money they need into it, and then they get past the paywall, use it one time, and then they don't have to worry about it again, right? So people have been, paying $8 to make fake accounts look like the real accounts. Like, for example, Lockheed Martin, the people that make our missiles and sell missiles across the world. Somebody made a fake Lockheed Martin account and started like posting a bunch of like based opinions, in my opinion, talking about like, hey, we love the smell of like dead people in the morning, something like that, stuff like that. It was like very like meme stuff, but like if you weren't paying attention, you would think it's the actual Lockheed Martin account. Or for example, there's a company that makes insulin. Somebody made a fake account of that company that makes insulin, and they posted that insulin was going to be free. And of course, everybody went nuts, and they were thinking, holy crap, finally it's happening. Like, I don't have to lose an arm and a leg just to go get insulin, medicine that I need to survive. It's going to be free from now on, right? Well, then now they had to go back and say that was fake, that it didn't happen. Like, can you imagine being somebody who needs insulin and hearing that insulin is free? Because even news outlets were reporting that's what was happening, right? News outlets were actually reporting that this company that makes insulin was going to be giving insulin away for free. So that's what's been happening right now, that all the, to prove a point, a lot of people have been paying the $8 fee to make fake accounts to basically show Elon Musk that, hey, listen, you bought the platform because you claimed that there was a lot of bots and a lot of fake accounts on Twitter, that supposedly there were so many fake accounts that you needed to go take out a $44 billion loan so that you can clean up Twitter. But you've made it so that the thing that you were worried about, you have caused the issue. You've caused more of the issue. And people have gone around making fake Elon Musk accounts and basically flaming this man, like putting up like so many disrespectful posts about him, acting like he's the one that's posting it. And so Elon has gone around and started banning people that were making these fake accounts about him. That's crazy to me that you took out a $44 billion loan to clean up Twitter, and you've made it worse. You've made the platform almost unusable to some people. That's nuts. That's insane. And it's only getting worse from here. Because it seemed to me, what it seems like is like every time that people piss off Elon Musk, he just does something else. And then that something else makes things worse. all I had to say is, good luck to you, Elon. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for when you took out that $44 billion loan to buy Twitter. Unfortunately, though, I think what's going to end up happening is, because he's already started to do it, he's already sold a bunch of Tesla stock, like his first company, the first company that he bought, and then basically try to become the owner of, or supposedly the creator of the Tesla car. And I do that in quotation marks because he's not the creator of the Tesla. There's two other people that created Tesla. He just bought it with his money and then tried to legally make it so that all the paperwork says that he's the one that created Tesla. But Elon has already sold his own Tesla stock just to keep Twitter afloat. Who knows how far he's going to take this? And I mean, like, it could be that Twitter ends up like falling apart as a platform. Maybe it doesn't exist in the next few years. It's possible that he tries to sell it. But at this point, I don't know anybody that would buy Twitter off of him, especially because, and I keep saying the number because it's outrageous, because he bought it for $44 billion. He's not going to get $44 billion back because the company wasn't even worth that much money to begin with. Like, this is all a bad joke that went too far for Elon. So what's the lesson here, folks? The lesson here is don't take shit on the internet too hard. You might end up taking out a $44 billion loan just to prove a point and then dramatically and horribly fail at trying to prove your point. But all right, so let's go into our last topic before we get into the manosphere stuff. And our last topic for tonight is the topic of free speech. Now, I don't know if you guys are listening are free speech advocates or free speech absolutists. And what that means is the fact that you think that free speech is free speech, right? You're allowed to say whatever the hell you want, no matter what. It doesn't matter what the consequences are, you're allowed to say it. And my counter to that is, think about what you just said, right? Because it's true, as people, right? We have free speech. We're allowed to speak freely. We are. And here in the United States, it's very evident that you're allowed to speak freely. You're allowed to speak your mind here in the United States, unlike in a lot of countries around the world where if you say the wrong thing, you're going to get your head popped off, right? But let's not try to act like free speech is always going to be free. Let's set up this example here for a second, right? I mean, it's an example from like grade school when you were kids, right? Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys remember Yo Mama jokes, right? And we all tend to have more of a defensive stance when it comes to our mothers, right? I remember when I was a kid, if a friend of mine or somebody that I knew took a Yo Mama joke too far, like, we're fighting. Okay? So, even as kids, we recognize that free speech isn't always free. There are consequences for the things that you say. And I think that's what people don't want to acknowledge. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that, yes, you are allowed to say whatever the hell you want, but know that there are consequences for saying them. It's a simple concept, really. Everywhere you go is going to have a different set of rules or different ground rules that they play by, right? For example, if you go to court, you can't just speak out of turn. You have to wait, and you have to speak a certain way to the judge, right? Otherwise, the court may find you in contempt, which means that they'll either escort you out of the courtroom and basically finish the trial or whatever you were doing without you, or you might just end up going to jail right away. And the same thing happens when we talk about social media platforms and their terms of service. Because the biggest argument for this free speech thing is when it comes to social media platforms and what you can say on them and what you're allowed to post, what you're allowed to say on them and stuff like that. So let's run it back to Twitter, for example, right? Where if you're using racial slurs or you're using the R word or you're using like sexist terminology or you're doing transphobic slurs or anything like that can get you banned or suspended for a while off the platform. And they do this because Twitter wants people to use the platform. And if you have a bunch of people that are constantly attacking other people or a group of people, then they're not going to want to use it, right? And that's going to hurt Twitter's bottom line at the end of the day, because your daily average users are what basically makes your platform's worth. How many users use you on a daily basis, that's how much your company is going to be worth. And if you have very little people using your platform because they're like every day they go on the platform, they're getting attacked by other people, then that's not going to work out for you. And so that's why Twitter, a private company, has a terms of service. Facebook or Meta at this point has a terms of service, things that you are allowed to say and you are allowed to post on their platforms, because it's going to hurt their bottom dollar if there is no type of regulation for speech. And even in the real world, like the example I just gave you earlier on, you know, like if you take a yo mama joke too far, then, you know, be ready to put your hands up. That's your consequence. People like to act like you can no longer say what you mean. And I always like to ask, you know, when people say like, oh, you can't say things anymore, like you can't say things like you used to. Like I'm sitting here thinking, well, then what is it really that you're trying to say? Like, what do you want to say so badly? You know what I mean? What is it that you want to say so badly that you're not allowed to say anymore? It's a legitimate question, right? When people start talking about free speech and there's no free speech anymore, what is it? What is it that you want to say so badly? What do you want to say with your whole ass chest right now that you're not allowed to say anymore? Just food for thought when it comes to free speech, right? And that's the way I see it. It's like there's always going to be a consequence for what you say. Even what I'm saying here on this platform, right? On this podcast, there's consequences for what I'm going to say here. And you just have to kind of learn to accept those consequences. Even comedians, right? When you talk about comedians and the subject matter that they talk about, things that they joke about, right? Not everybody is going to be like primed and ready to hear what you're going to be talking about. People are sensitive. And I think that if you find a good balance, a way to respect people's sensitivities or whatever you want to call it, then we really wouldn't be having this issue about free speech. Now you may be thinking like, hey, you gotta just toughen up, right? Like you can't be sensitive. You can't be overly sensitive. Like you gotta toughen up. And I mean, like, there's things that bother everybody. You may be one of the people that don't get easily bothered, and that's fine. But at some point, someone's going to say something that's going to bother you, right? And so when you're put in that situation where you're the person that's offended and you're acting, like, are you thinking about free speech at that point? Probably not. You're probably not thinking about free speech at that time. And it goes on both sides of the aisle, right? It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe, what political affiliation you have. There are things that offend you, and you're not, and when it does offend you, you're not thinking about like, oh, well, they have a right to say it. You're not thinking about that. Most of the time you're thinking about like, how can I get this person to shut up about what they're talking about? So the question arises, like, is free speech really free? And I say there's no such thing as true free speech. You can get close right? You can get close. And here in this country, in the United States, we get very, very close to having just like free speech, because you can, you know, you have people that say fuck Joe Biden, people that say fuck Donald Trump, people that say, you know, fuck whoever, and they're allowed to say that. You know, they're allowed to say it, and there's no consequences. No one's gonna come kill you for saying things like that, right? I mean, they might, but it's not like the government is gonna send people to come kill you. It's not like other countries where if you talk bad about the person in charge, like, you're gonna die. So in that sense, yes, free speech exists in that sense, where you're allowed to express how you feel freely without having to worry about like something happening to you where you're going to be maimed or hurt or whatever. But at the individual level, and I say free speech at like the governmental level, like the First Amendment, you're allowed to your free speech and stuff like that. That's what I was talking about before. But at the individual level, right, free speech does not exist. It really just doesn't. There's no such thing as absolute free speech. Because going to my earlier point, you're going to offend somebody. There's always going to be somebody that's offended. And it does not matter who it is. It's going to happen at some point. All right, so that's going to be that's the last segment for the regular podcast stuff. So let's talk about the manosphere. Right, I've been saving like the last segment for stuff that the manosphere has been trying to put out there and stuff like that. So the manosphere, right? Let's talk about what they purport is actually happening, and that is that men are under attack. Now, I like to say that there is a very minuscule amount of truth there, that men are under attack. There's a very minuscule truth in that, but it's not to the point where like you have to do stuff about it, right? Because let's think about it for a second. Who's been in charge all these years? It's been men. Men have been in charge of a lot of stuff throughout the years. There's been hardly any women that have been in charge of anything. And that's just because society made it that way. It's not because of the belief. It is because of the belief, but it's not necessarily true that like men are smarter or anything like that than women. It's just because society has been brainwashed essentially to believe in that. There are women that are smarter than your average guy. Plenty of women out there that are smart. But yet, because of the way society is, we like to think that men are more intelligent, men are more fit to lead and stuff like that. So, because of the way history has happened, like I always like to ask myself, how exactly are men being attacked? Now, there's something that I've heard in the past, and it kind of resonates with me, and it is when things are finally starting to equal out. It's always to the people that have always been in charge. It's going to seem like they're being attacked, that they're being excluded or something like that. And it's true. Equality to the people that used to be in charge is going to feel like attacks. And I do believe that's where a lot of this like manosphere, men are being attacked, is coming from. It used to be that the men used to go to work and women used to just stay home and handle the house, right? But life has become such that you can really no longer do it on one salary. you need both sides of the relationship to work. The man and the woman now have to go to work just to make it, honestly. And so when women are coming and they notice that they may not be getting paid the exact same as like a man that's doing the same amount of work, same amount of experience, all that stuff, of course, when they come and try to ask for more, it's gonna seem like men are being attacked. But let's again take a second to step back and look at what society was before modern times and realize that men and women, because of society, have not been equal. So now that women are trying to at least get to where men are, it's gonna seem like men are being attacked. I mean, that's all it is, honestly. As a man, I don't feel like I'm being attacked, if I'm honest with you guys. Far from it. Like, I mean, for example, when I started teaching again, and I was out in the trailer, you know, the trailer that I was working in is all female. And when they saw me come in, they were like, oh, we are happy to have a man teacher here because maybe you can set some discipline and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny because they're already programmed to think that way. Right? Because of the way society is, they're programmed to think that because I'm a man, I'm going to be just going to set my foot down immediately, right? But it's so weird that that's the case. And so again, when you're trying to get equity in society, when you're trying to get some type of equity in society, the people that have been in power, the people that have been in charge, are always going to see it as now they're being oppressed, now they're being excluded from things. But that's not, again, it's not the case. It's just the playing field is trying to be leveled out. And so maybe like we have a few more women in positions of power than we have men for a while, just so that things get equaled out. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and end it there. That's gonna be the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sitting here for an hour with me and listening to me ramble on about the random things that, well, not necessarily random, but you know, just my random ramblings about things that I've kind of put on the list to talk about. It's been awesome doing this. This is the 3rd episode. And I can't wait to do more of these. So I'm going to sign off here, ladies and gentlemen. I will catch you in the next episode. I've been Dark Spade, and you have been awesome. Thank you once again for sticking around for an hour. And I'll catch you at the next episode.